As the United Nations celebrates its 75th anniversary, what are some of the biggest challenges it faces? Hello, I'm Anand, Naidoo, and welcome to a special edition of The Heat. "2020 has been a year of unprecedented crises. A rampaging coronavirus pandemic has killed nearly 1 million people worldwide. The global economy is struggling from the impact of lockdowns. Conflict has displaced millions. Against this backdrop, this year's United Nations General Assembly kicks off in an unprecedented virtual format. As part of our programming celebrating the UN's 75 years, we're interviewing high-ranking diplomats on some of the biggest issues we face. I spoke with Jean-Pierre Lacroix, Under-Secretary General for Peace Operations, about the obstacles the UN faces to reducing global conflict. But first, my interview with Saudi Arabia's ambassador to the United Nations, Abdallah Al Mouallimi. We talked about some of the most intractable challenges, such as the Israeli-Palestinian crisis, Saudi Arabia's role in the Yemen war, and its fractured ties with rival Iran. Ambassador, let's start with the one big diplomatic development in the Middle East. That's the normalization of diplomatic relations between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. How significant is that?
Well, it is significant in the sense that it creates new conditions in terms of Arab-Israeli relations. But as you know, the Kingdom is still committed to the Arab Peace Initiative that was presented in 2002 and was adopted by all the Arab countries. And we hope that this development does not take away from the need for a comprehensive resolution of the Palestinian crisis and the creation of an independent Palestinian state and the creation of the two-state solution.
You say Saudi Arabia is still committed to the Arab Peace Initiative, but doesn't this diplomatic move between Israel and the United Arab Emirates actually take the pressure off Israel? Because in a sense, Israel has long sought diplomatic recognition in the Arab world. It's got what it's wanted without making any kind of concession. And if we look at the situation on the ground, the occupation continues. The dispossession of Palestinian property continues. Settlements continue to expand. Doesn't this send a message that the Arab world has in fact abandoned the Palestinian cause?
No, it doesn't, because the Arab world has repeatedly reaffirmed its commitment to the Arab Peace Initiative proposed by Saudi Arabia. This agreement affects one Arab country, but the full range of Arab states, as well as Muslim majority states, are still lining up behind the principle of the two-state solution and full Israeli withdrawal from Arab territories. I might add, even the United Arab Emirates have reaffirmed their commitment to this solution.
Now, Saudi Arabia, while not extending formal diplomatic recognition to Israel, has in fact allowed Israeli flights to go over its territory. What prompted that?
Well, we have allowed flights going to the United Arab Emirates back and forth, both Israeli and Emirati, but we have not issued a blanket agreement for Israeli flights to cross Saudi Arabian airspace. What prompted that? The very strong relations and the special bonds that are there between Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. And if our brothers in the United Arab Emirates ask us to do something like that, we will do it for them.
Now, President Trump believes that Saudi Arabia, and he says even Iran at some stage, could follow the example of the United Arab Emirates and establish diplomatic relations with Israel. Do you share that optimism?
Of course, all the Arab countries and all the Islamic countries could follow the example of the United Arab Emirates and establish relations with Israel, provided Israel undertakes what it needs to do, which is the end of the occupation and the establishment of the independent Palestinian state. So it is not out of possibility that this may happen if the Israelis respond and cooperate favorably.
Right, that's a big condition you've attached to that, though. But given these diplomatic changes that we've seen in the past few weeks, does it really advance the two-state solution, or is it a setback?
I don't think it is a setback. The United Arab Emirates reaffirmed that they are committed to the two-state solution. They have put conditions on the further expansion of Israeli settlements and on putting a halt to the annexation plans of Israel. All of that serves the purpose of strengthening the Arab and Palestinian position with regards to the settlements and with regards to the annexation. So it should not be a negative. It should be used for what it can be used
Right.
for. But as I said, as far as Saudi Arabia, it does not set an example to follow.
Yeah, the reason I asked that question is because the Palestinians see this as a betrayal. In fact, Palestinian leader Hanan Ashrawi said that this was a stab in the back of the Palestinians.
Well, the Palestinians are obviously justified in feeling bitterness and anger because they have not been getting anything from the Israelis in spite of many, many years of negotiations and in spite of substantial concessions that the Palestinians have offered. So as the aggrieved party, it's not surprising to see that there are reactions within the Palestinians that are not favorable to this agreement. We understand that, and we support the Palestinians' call for independence and sovereignty.
Now, one of President Trump's key advisors, who is also his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, was recently in Saudi Arabia. What was the point of that visit and what was achieved?
Contacts between Saudi Arabia and the United States are ongoing at all levels. And Jared Kushner was in the region and he decided to visit Saudi Arabia. He's always welcome there as the representative of the administration and as a representative of the President of the United States. And it is not unusual for Saudi Arabia and the United States to have discussions and communications on a whole wide range of issues.
Ambassador, I want to turn now to the murder of the Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi in 2018. A Saudi court in Riyadh has handed down rulings for 8 Saudi nationals implicated in the murder. None will be executed, but they will be serving prison sentences. However, the manner in which the trial was conducted and its outcome has been criticized here in the United States as well as at the United Nations. In fact, the UN investigator Agnes Kalimard said that no senior officials nor those suspected of orchestrating the killings have been found guilty. What do you make of this response?
Well, we are used to so-called independent observers and others criticizing Saudi Arabia no matter what it does. When the original verdicts were issued and the sentences were issued, and they included the death sentence to 5 of the defendants, there was an uproar. Why would you resort to death sentence and so forth? When the death sentence was commuted to 20 years of jail, again, we hear different sets of criticisms. So we do not run our legal system on the basis of trying to satisfy anybody or trying to get the endorsement or the support from anybody, whether it is the United Nations representative or anybody else for that matter. We conduct our legal system on the basis of trying to pursue justice and trying to conduct our affairs in an objective and independent manner.
Right, but the accusation here, Ambassador, is that people at the highest levels in Saudi Arabia orchestrated this killing, and that's not coming from independent observers, that's coming from your allies, from the CIA and other Western intelligence agencies, who say that Prince Mohammed bin Salman directly ordered Mr. Khashoggi's assassination.
I have not seen any such report that implicates the Crown Prince or anybody else for that matter. All of this is journal talk and speculation and rumors and innuendo. Prince Mohammed bin Salman has, of course, stood up courageously and said the buck stops here. And he took full responsibility since this thing happened under his watch, and part of that responsibility is to make sure that those who are involved in this process are presented to justice. And this is what happened. And when you present people to justice, some people will be acquitted, some people will be convicted. And again, that's exactly what happened.
I want to turn now to the war in Yemen. Reuters news agency reports that coalition forces fighting in Yemen intercepted and destroyed a drone which was reportedly fired at an airport in the south of the country. What do you make of these developments in Yemen right now?
Well, we have become used to these repeated attacks from the Houthis in total disregard for the possibility of causing civilian casualties. This is a bustling international airport in the south of Saudi Arabia, and it has been subject to repeated attacks by drones and by equipment and weapons that are supplied to them by the Iranian regime. We have been calling the Iranian regime to task on that. We have been asking the international community to take the necessary measures to prevent that from happening. And of course, we have been trying to take the appropriate reaction militarily against the Houthis in Yemen. And we will continue to do so. We will continue to defend our borders. We will continue to defend our cities and airports and civilian population. And we will continue to support the legitimate government of Yemen as per the United Nations resolutions.
Let's turn to relations with Iran. Saudi Arabia has joined Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar and the United Arab Emirates in a letter urging the United Nations to reimpose or renew that arms embargo against Iran. That was dismissed at the United Nations. What next?
Well, what next is up to the international community, is up to the 5+1 countries that were involved in the JCPOA. We hope that they will not abandon the pursuit of efforts towards denying Iran the luxury and the opportunity to import weapons and to supply them to the Houthis and to Hezbollah and to the militias in Iraq and to Syrian forces and so forth. This is irresponsible behavior on the part of Iran, and if the situation with regards to the JCPOA and the embargo doesn't change, in other words, if the embargo is lifted, we can expect more of this arrogant and irresponsible behavior. And I think it is up to the Security Council and to the powers of the JCPOA to take the appropriate action. We have been talking to many of them. They are emphasizing the technicality of whether the United States can or cannot call for the snapback provisions to be applied as a result of their withdrawal from the JCPOA. But
right.
Many of them are supportive of the Saudi Arabian position and the Gulf position that Iran's behavior has been outrageous and that behavior cannot and should not be tolerated.
Right, Ambassador, you say Iran's behavior has been outrageous and irresponsible, but all sides agree that Iran was in complete compliance with the JCPOA at the time when the United States unilaterally decided to pull out of that agreement, in fact, violating the agreement unilaterally.
I'm not sure that full compliance is an accurate description for Iran's behavior, but I'm not going to get involved in the discussion about the JCPOA. This is something that we are not involved in. We were not consulted about it. We were not party to the negotiations or the discussions. This is up to the parties to the JCPOA to explain their positions on that. I'm talking about the fact that Iran has been supplying weapons. This has been confirmed by the United Nations, has been confirmed by many of the countries that are party to the JCPOA. I'm talking about Iran's conduct with regard to attacks against the oil facilities of Aramco in Saudi Arabia, against the oil tankers in the Arabian Gulf and in the Gulf of Oman. These are documented and supported events that have nothing to do with whether Iran is complying with the nuclear agreement or not. That's something that concerns the world. What concerns me is what attacks Iran has been conducting against Saudi Arabia, either directly or through the Houthis.
Ambassador, thanks so much for joining us. That was Saudi Arabia's ambassador to the United Nations, Abdallah Al Mouallimi. The United Nations takes an active role in promoting peace using diplomacy, but also boots on the ground. Currently, 13 peacekeeping operations are active, most of them in Africa. Amid the global pandemic, my interview with the UN Under-Secretary General for Peace Operations, Jean-Pierre Lacroix, was done via Zoom. And I started by asking him how COVID-19 is affecting the body's mission.
It is certainly a challenge because COVID-19 is affecting all the countries in which UN peacekeeping operations are deployed, and the pandemic has consequences in the area of the economy, but also consequences on the political and potentially on the security situation. On the other hand, it is also a challenge because we need to protect our own people from the pandemic, and this is a precondition for us to be able to continue implementing our mandate, that is to continue protecting civilians and supporting peace. So yes, it is a challenge. At the same time, I can tell you that our missions have been able so far to contain the spread of the virus within the peacekeeping community, and our colleagues in the field have also been very active in helping local communities and local authorities in their fight against COVID-19.
In March, the Secretary General of the United Nations called for a global ceasefire so that life-saving equipment can get to communities that are facing conflict, that are facing strife around the world. How much success did that call meet with?
Well, the call of the Secretary General had quite a significant impact, and indeed we saw, including in some of the countries in which UN peacekeeping is deployed, a number of protagonists of those conflicts adhering to the Secretary General call. On the other hand, I believe that much more needs to be done so that this call for a global ceasefire, which is more relevant than ever, be really materialized on the ground. What we are doing on the ground, in addition to our efforts to protect civilians, is really to convey that very important message from the Secretary General that it is time now to stop fighting and really to give total priority to the fight against COVID-19.
Your mission is to find political solutions to these conflicts, to try and defuse them. Where are your major challenges right now around the world?
I believe that we are looking at situations where the risk resulting from COVID-19 and particularly the security risk could exacerbate what already are very serious situations. And we are concerned about that. I think it's important that in spite of COVID-19, efforts towards peace should not abate, should not stop. And this is really what we've been doing in all the situations in which peacekeeping is active. We have been continuing our efforts, be it in Sudan or South Sudan or Mali, Central African Republic, to promote the continuous efforts towards peace, continuity of political efforts, even though it is much more difficult than usually, because most of the in-person contact that are really so important for the political negotiation and peace talks cannot really happen now. And peace efforts done virtually are more challenging, but at the same time, that should not stop us from continuing these efforts. This is exactly what our mission have been doing. So in addition to helping the population, in addition to this particular effort that we're making in participating in the fight against COVID-19, where we are deployed, there really has to be an emphasis on this continuous effort towards peace, in spite of all these additional challenges resulting from the pandemic.
You mentioned Mali. There's a major challenge that you face there. 130 peacekeepers have been killed. in those operations in Mali. What can you tell us about the situation there?
Mali still confronts these major challenges to its security and its territorial integrity. The terrorist threat has not diminished, not at all. And Mali, and indeed the whole Sahel region, needs to be completely focused on addressing these key challenges with the support of the international community and certainly with the support of the UN. So we believe that it's really important that there should be a quick decision on a political transition. And this is really what we are promoting, and we're working with the regional organization ECOWAS and other international partners to support these efforts. And of course, I would add that the political transition has to be supported by the Malian people. It is very important to make sure that this transition will have the support and the buy-in of the population, and that will and also that process should be as inclusive as possible. These are very important criteria, I believe, because again, what really lies ahead for Mali and the region is the continuity and even enhanced efforts for the fight against terrorism. And of course, the region is also now suffering from the impact of COVID-19, and these are also additional challenges to already very difficult situation.
Ambassador, what about the situation in South Sudan? You've had to withdraw troops from that country. What prompted that withdrawal?
Well, the mission didn't really withdraw troops. We had a few cases at the very beginning of the pandemic, but they were really a minority. What is happening in South Sudan is that on the one hand, the political process, these efforts towards the implementation of the revitalized peace agreement were undoubtedly slowed down by the pandemic. However, there has been progress, but probably below what would have been expected had there not been the COVID-19 pandemic. On the other hand, what we are seeing in the field is a worrying increase in intercommunal violence. I mean, the revitalized peace agreement had globally a very positive impact on the security situation in South Sudan, and we are really and we have been working a lot to preserve those gains. I think those gains are still there to a certain extent, but we are concerned about the upsurge of intercommunal violence, and South Sudan is obviously affected by COVID-19 as well, with a very weak healthcare system. Our colleagues and our peacekeepers in the field have been doing really what they could, their utmost to help communities, and not only in the protection of civilian camps, but wherever they could to mitigate the impact of COVID-19. But this is another challenge that adds to the situation in South Sudan.
What can you tell us about the UNIFIL mission in Lebanon? I mean, in addition to maintaining security there, you're also facing political challenges right now. The United States and Israel have called for major reforms of the UN peacekeeping mission there. The mandate of that mission, we know, has been extended for a year, but what kind of reforms are they calling for?
Well, I think it's important to recall that indeed, as you said, I mean, the Security Council renewed the mandate of UNIFIL, and that mandate didn't really change. And UNIFIL is playing an absolutely crucial role because this is a tense region. This is a tense situation in southern Lebanon and in the whole Middle East region. And thanks to the UNIFIL and thanks to the role of our peacekeepers, peace has been maintained in southern Lebanon and across the Blue Line. And the incidents that occurred on quite a regular basis are very quickly de-escalated because of our peacekeepers. I should also add that the UNIFIL is playing a very important role in facilitating liaison between the Lebanese armed forces and the Israeli defense forces. And this is also something that is useful because it helps prevent misunderstanding or potential risk for escalation. On the other hand, what is important, that what has been a key element of the mandate, is the strengthening of the role and presence of the Lebanese state in southern Lebanon, and particularly the strengthening of the presence of the Lebanese armed forces. We think that it's very important to continue working towards reaching that objective. Lebanon is currently challenged. It has political difficulties. It has economic. It is in a very serious economic situation. And in addition to that, there has been this terrible disaster, this blast in Beirut's port, for which, by the way, our peacekeepers have been working very actively to support the relief efforts. So all of this makes it challenging for the strengthening of the presence of the Lebanese state, and particularly Lebanese armed forces in southern Lebanon. At the same time, we think it's important to continue in that direction. And indeed, we work with the Lebanese armed forces. They are our partners.
Ambassador, a question that comes up perennially, and that is reform of the entire UN peacekeeping structure, if I could call it that. In 2017, the UN Secretary General proposed some reforms. In fact, the calls for reform, or the plans for reform, go back to a few years before that, to 2014. But what kinds of reforms are you looking for, and where do those plans stand right now?
Yes, the Secretary General launched in 2018 a very important initiative on peacekeeping, which is called Action for Peacekeeping. And Action for Peacekeeping is really about improving the impact of peacekeeping, both the impact on political efforts and efforts towards reaching political solution, the impact on performance, improving the capacity to react quickly, to improve training, to improve equipment, preparedness, mindset, and so on and so forth. Improve the partnership that we have as peacekeepers with other stakeholders, regional, sub-regional organizations, or UN agencies and other partners. Improve and enhance the number of women in peacekeeping, and also promote the increased role of women in political processes and efforts, and improve the safety and security on peacekeepers, on which I believe we've seen significant improvement. It's time to take stock of what has been achieved and what remains to be worked on. And I believe that this is something on which we will have a thorough discussion with our member states, a thorough discussion with our troop and police contributing country, because peacekeeping is a collective effort. And what we've been achieved, we did it because of this partnership with member states. What remains to be achieved, we will discuss that with them, and we will move forward. I believe that ultimately what really is paramount is that we expect from member states continuous and even enhanced support. We expect them more efforts to support our political efforts. We expect them to help us with providing the best possible units to help other troop and police contributing country improve their training, their equipment. And as far as we are concerned, of course, we're committed to continuing and even strengthening our, enhancing our efforts.
Ambassador, thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much.
And that is all for this special edition of The Heat. I'm Anand in Washington, D.C. Thanks for being with us.